What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we're going to be taking a look at Abzan Greasefang for the Pioneer format. Essentially the most played combo deck, at least from the stats according to MTG Goldfish, and we're going to obviously go over it. We're going to find out the reasons why and essentially what makes this deck so powerful. Of course, before we get too deep into it, I would like to let you know that if you are not subscribed to the channel, what the heck are you doing? I post Pioneer content, modern content, and some other like long-ish form like essay videos and stuff like that. Just stuff that kind of pertains to like the competitive, like either history or what's currently going on in the modern or Pioneer format. Easily some of the most popular Eternal formats, not named Commander. So if any of that is interest to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell, and traveling into the description of this video and following two separate links. One goes to my Twitch channel. Go ahead, throw me a follow over there so you can catch live content when I decide to go live. And the Discord server as well. Go ahead and join. It's free, and feel free to talk about anything Magic related. I love talking about like Modern and Pioneer. I always love trying to learn new things, and of course, like I post a decent amount of videos, so definitely a lot to talk about in regards to things like that. So if any of that's interests you, go ahead, do all that stuff, and let's get into the deck. This list in particular was played by Setoline with 5-0 Pioneer League back on March 20th, and we already see some interesting changes made to the deck. So in the spells slot, like they would normally play a card like Grizzly Salvage, which is essentially like a Satyr Wayfinder, but you get to dig one card deeper and do it at instant speed. And you get to pick a creature or land. This you only get a land, but definitely like deciding to kind of cut that out of the deck, play a little bit more disruption, playing like Duress, Thoughtseize. Can't Stay Away used to be like a full like 4 of in the deck, and now it's down. Looks like it's down to a 1 of in favor of Eldritch Evolution. So you get to play these 2 mana cards that end up forwarding your game plan. So what exactly is the game plan? The game plan really is to get a Parhelion 2 into the graveyard, which when it attacks, it creates 2 4/4 angel tokens with flying and vigilance that are attacking. So essentially, you get this into play by playing Greasefang, Okiba Boss, which says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you return target vehicle card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, and you return to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Essentially, Greasefang gets to bring back either Isuka's Chariot, Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. The one that you definitely want to be bringing back, like on turn 3 when you play Greasefang, is Parhelion 2. And essentially, before you get to declare attackers, because there is 5 different steps inside of combat, you get to bring it back with Greasefang, and then Greasefang is actually able to crew it because it has 4 power. Parhelion has crew 4. These other guys have like crew 4, crew 3 stuff. So then you get to attack this Parhelion. You get to deal 13 damage, more than likely, or make your opponent trade off. Not even really trade, I guess, like really jump block. And the game is over like on the next turn. Like you have 2 angels. They get to hang back. They're gonna get to play great defense. Like you're probably not going to lose to like the super aggressive decks because they're gonna have a really hard time beating a 4/4, let alone 2 4/4s. And of course, like you have all these ways to kind of like discard, Parhelion. You're playing 8 copies of Professor of Symbology, Rafine's Informant. Of course, can mill it with Satyr Wayfinder, and essentially trying to also hit your land drops. And you can even like Thoughtseize / Duress yourself to get rid of those cards. Like you don't have to use them on your opponent. You can target yourself. Oh, Duress actually is target opponent. That's wild to me. Thoughtseize is target player, so you can Thoughtseize yourself. I'm glad that I can make that realization in the middle of the video, so I guess that's kind of cool. I never noticed that Duress said target opponent. So what are some other things you can do with this deck? Essentially, that's kind of like the pony show with it. Like Greasefang plus Parhelion deals like a ton of damage. Isuka's Chariot plus Greasefang, essentially like you just get to like make 2/2s, and if your opponent kills the Chariot, then Greasefang just gets back the Chariot to make more 2/2s, and then of course you get to crew and attack, make another token, and then the Isuka's Chariot comes back to your hand. You get to replay it, and that's kind of like the technology that this deck has like instilled. Is essentially like and it gets 2 other vehicles that have some really good ETBs, so that the bounce from the Greasefang isn't like that backbreaking, and getting to cast like Chariot and Sky Sovereign isn't that hard at 4 and 5 mana. And really, on the turns and games that you don't have like a turn 3 Greasefang bring back Parhelion, there's definitely a large amount of the time where like casting a Parhelion can just straight up win the game, you know. And obviously with it getting to stick around and attack, like you really probably need 2 attacks, because you're just going to swing for, you know, 13 damage on the first attack, and then you're going to swing for 21 on the next one, presumably, assuming all your angels live. So this deck kind of combines like a fast combo, but if your opponent wants to play grindy and kind of disrupt you, then you do have this game plan where you can just go along and play like these very powerful vehicles. Obviously, Chariot and Sky Sovereign are playing like the green-red vehicles deck, so like they have to be really good, right? So good, in fact, that, you know, this deck that was just kind of all in on this combo just plays them because they're really good cards, and you can crew them, and they just completely disrupt like any opponent's trying to be aggressive. Ends the game really quick, takes care of planeswalkers, Chariot just helping you go wide, things like that. Also, because this deck is playing 4 Eldritch Evolution, and we have 12 2-mana creatures, Evolution can go get a copy of Shield of the Apocalypse, again kind of feeding into that longer game plan, and crucially having 4 power, so it can crew a Parhelion or Chariot if it needs to. We all know Shieldred is essentially one of the most popular cards in Pioneer, you know, creeping into Modern, very popular in Standard, so I've heard. And the fact that this card can just sits on the battlefield, plays great defense, and when you want to turn to offense, the Shieldred doesn't even have to get in the red zone, because it can just crew up a vehicle and go in and attack your opponent that way. So really nice like technology and improvements from this deck, because we did not see that, you know. I believe it was like November was like the last time we really looked at this deck on the channel. So I mean, like, very powerful stuff. It's doing, you know, great. It's doing powerful things early, and it's also doing powerful things in the mid to late game, which I think is like required of like a lot of decks. Like if you're not like an all aggro deck, kind of like the Tarka Red decks, and like kind of how Red White Heroic and stuff was, then you have to be able to play some middle and late game. Of course, I think Red Black Midrange probably plays some of the best mid to late game, and even with like some of their removal and disruption, they can play a pretty decent early game as well. But like this Greasefang deck just gets to kind of plow through like the discard spells that the Rakdos deck wants to play, and really forces it to have like Graveyard Trespasser and things like that in order to actually interact with it. And even on that front, like getting control of the graveyard really doesn't do anything when your opponent can just go get a Shieldred, or you can just go get a Greasefang, and, you know, again, have just a creature in play that can crew these vehicles, or even just hitting land drops so you can play these vehicles, shoot down your opponent's creatures on that side of the board, and then also just get in and take out another one and chunk them for 6 damage with Sky Sovereign console flagship. The mana base, I guess before we get even farther, just kind of on my little tangent here, you have like a Beseiju, Takenuma looks like as kind of your utility lands in this deck. Definitely things that you can hit with Satyr Wayfinder. Beseiju getting to stop cards like Grafdigger's Cage, I believe, stops these, because they're not even creatures. Grafdigger's Cage probably can't even stop that. That's going to be interesting to find out. So you have that, and then like you have Takenuma, which can mill you as well, on top of also getting back like a Greasefang or like a Shieldred and so on. It is cheaper to channel if you have a Greasefang, Shieldred, or both into play. You actually lower it up to 2 mana, or down to 2 mana, so that's pretty interesting. The rest of the mana base is just trying to have like as consistent mana as possible. You're playing the full set of like Blooming Marsh and Concealed Courtyard. Keep your life total high, because that can be an issue in some of the more aggressive matchups. That's kind of how people tackle the format, is if they're either just lightning fast right out of the gate, or they try to play like the longer game. And really, like, people do tend to gravitate towards like the more aggressive deck, so playing like the marshes, the courtyards, the pathways and stuff, and kind of limiting yourself to like 2 Temple Garden, 2 Godless Shrine, and Overgrown Tomb. I'm actually surprised to see like as many mana confluences. But I guess you also want to be casting like these white spells, but then also casting like double green spells. You have this giant double white spell like the Indian Curve and things like that, just ensuring that you have all colors of mana. And if you take like an extra point or two of damage, it's like it'll be fine, because normally you are able to end the game a lot faster than most people, or at least disrupt / force your opponent to play in a certain way to where you can throw them off their game plan and just hopefully win the game from there. Even if they stop like one half, like the graveyard half of the deck, you do have a pretty decent to very good like a middle to late game, as long as you're able to hit your lands and cast all your powerful vehicles and stuff. The sideboard, some interesting things. Since Professor Symbology enters the battlefield, you learn. So I guess something I should explain. Something important, when you learn, you can either get a lesson card from outside the game, aka your sideboard, or you discard a card to draw a card. So while Rafid's Informant, when you connive, you draw, then discard. The Professor of Symbology gives you the option to go the opposite, where you just discard and then get to draw a card. But the fact that you do get to learn and you get to search your sideboard for a lesson card, you get cards like Necrotic Fumes, which you can exile a creature you control to exile target creature or Planeswalker. I believe... Oh no, there's Containment Breach. I don't even know this card. Like, I've never seen this. Destroy an artifact or enchantment. If its mana value is 2 or less, you make a 1/1. To which then, like, gets to play on like Chumbok duty and stuff like that. Basic Conjuration. Look at the 6 cards, reveal a creature from among them, put it into your hand. You gain 3 life. Can be pretty good against some like aggressive decks. I mean, you just definitely get some tools like that. These are some pretty decent cards to just have in your sideboard anyway. Maybe you're just kind of looking for cards to fill out the sideboard. Playing these Bank Busters. Bank Buster's pretty big. It's cheap. Draws you extra cards when you need it. Licensors gets to mess with like your opponent's graveyard. On top of like the people that decide to play like Blue Red Phoenix or like the spells decks and things like that. Another Shieldred, because you never know when you need another Shieldred. Getting to play these long grinding matchups, Shieldred is going to be a house if your opponent does not answer or have an answer for it right away, and it's going to cost them dearly. On top of the fact that, again, you have these like vehicles that you want to be crunching in with, because if they go to the graveyard, you have this option for Greasefang to get them back. So definitely some good stuff. I like the 75. That's the Abzan Greasefang deck for Pioneer. If you have any interest in this deck, I might really kind of lean towards playing this deck for playing some matches with it. I think it's really powerful. Obviously, anything that puts like a bunch of power into play, people were calling this kind of like the Splinter twin of the format, even though we have like other combo decks, kind of like the Creativity deck. And the Creativity deck, I think, might be a hair on the consistent side, more so than like the Greasefang deck. But the Greasefang deck is just very powerful. Like even if your opponent is like interacting it with like counter spells and stuff like that, all of your pieces kind of work in tandem. In the Creativity deck, you just have 2 cards flat out that you cannot, like, you can play them, but like you're trying to like cheat them to play. And if your opponent interacts with you in a meaningful way, aka with your creativities and such, you are going to have a hard time actually winning the game. Where this is kind of the more consistent, like even if your opponent is trying to rip apart your hand with discard spells, they're trying to counter all of your spells, so on and so forth. You kind of have this inevitability where like if they're not able to disrupt you and put a clock on you, eventually you will just win the game from the fact that like your cards are a lot heavier at the top end and could easily just kind of crush your opponent if they even stumble for a turn and they're not able to apply enough pressure to like force you to make suboptimal plays. So that is the Abzan Greasefang deck for the Pioneer format. If you enjoyed the video, of course, consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when videos like this get posted. Of course, I post other like modern content and other essay stuff. So again, if any of that stuff interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel. Follow the links in the description to my Twitch channel. Go throw me a follow over there, and of course, join the Discord server. That's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video.